switch on the recording.
Okay.
And it's my pleasure now to welcome you to this meeting of the Child and Family Services Scrutiny Performance Panel. We've got Damien in at the moment. I don't know if you're going to be on your own or no.
Dave's here as well. Dave's just joined, and Elliot's here as well. So
and Elliot, so welcome to the three of you. So I'm glad you're not going to be on your own, Damien, because it would have been a hard time otherwise. But there we go. Okay, item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Liz?
We've received apologies from Mike Day, Erica Kirshner, Mike Dirk and Julie Davis. Okay.
Hopefully the others will join us as we go on then. Item 2 is any disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests. If anybody got any of those, if they want to declare them now, this is your chance so to do. All right, that's no response as far as I can see. Item 3 is the prohibition of whip votes and the declaration of party whips. Item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. You've had a chance to have a good look at them before the meeting. I don't know if anybody's got any points that they would like to raise. If not, are you happy to accept them as a true record, please? Okay, a couple of nodding heads and nobody's actually commenting on that. So thank you for that. Item 5 is public question time. I don't think we have any, do we, Liz?
You did ask us to put our mics off.
Pardon? Well, you could put your hand up.
You did ask us. You did ask us to put our mics off.
Well, you could put your hands up and then I'd have called you then, see, Des? Okay, sorry, Liz. Public questions?
No questions. No public questions.
Okay, which takes us straight through to item 6, performance monitoring. I think David is going to present this, but I don't know if Dave Howes or Elliot want to say anything before Damien comes in?
I didn't have anything to say before Damien, Chair, but I'm sure I'll have some comments once he's finished.
Okay. Fine, thanks, David. Okay, Damien, I'll hand over to you now, but obviously from what I can see there, in terms of what is happening with you at the moment, you're obviously changing over to the Wccis system.
Yeah.
That means that data that we would normally have is not there in total. And for example, there's only 2 months data in the various places because you haven't got the background. So I'm sure you will talk us through that anyway. But the other question I will ask is at this stage is how much is Wccis impacting on service provision? And perhaps David might want to comment on that as well, Damien. But I just wanted to say, obviously, you have got the new system and it is causing you problems, I guess, in terms of getting the figures out. But hopefully we will look forward and listen with interest to what you've got to say.
Yeah, if I go through the report, then do people want me to share the screen of the report, or have people got that in front of them and are happy for me to just?
If you could, it would probably be easier, Damien, because
yeah, not a problem at all. Bear with me while I try and use the technology and make sure I bring up the right screen. Has that shared the report?
Yes.
Lovely. That's always good, isn't it? Okay. So rather than break down through the headlines, let me talk you through the wider kind of bits, I suppose, within that. I'll pick up some of the data and the information that's on that first page anyway. That's really an overall kind of front page summary. So if I just talk you through, I'm going to start from contacts demand. Okay. So as you've already said, with Wccis, we are able to now start capturing the contacts of the service and developing monthly comparison figures. But obviously, as you've rightly pointed out, we're only able to get the last 2 months rather than the last sort of 12 months. But going forward, obviously, month by month, that will increase now going forward because we're able to do that on the system. So we've seen an increase in contacts by 10 since last month. We've had an increase in contacts going to the safeguarding hub. We've had 16 children now passed over to preventative services rather than coming into the main service. We've seen continued regular good kind of case closures. 75 children were closed across children and family services. And we've seen a slight reduction in a number of children being supported across the whole service. So I think it's down by about 9. So when we're then looking through in terms of early help, We've got the increase in the number of cases being supported by early help. It's gone up to 825 from 798. There's been an increase in capacity, though, in early help hubs as a result of staff returning from leave and 5 new starters. So we've been able to offer more and more preventative support. So although we've seen more increase, we've actually got more capacity in the service to meet that. We're talking about awaiting allocations, I suppose, across the board, really. So this month, this figure's been skewed by Wccis reporting issues, which are being resolved and are not a direct reflection of practice. We're looking at how we rectify and resolve that within the Wccis system at the moment. In early help, there have been staffing issues that have also impacted on the system being updated. So that's business support staff and shortage business support staff. This hasn't actually stopped cases from being allocated. It's just stopped them showing on the system as being allocated. And I've had assurance from managers and senior managers from within those areas that cases are being allocated and managed as expected. But we need to reflect that through onto Wccis. And then the last bit then is in early help, there was an increase in closures, quite a significant increase in closures, 71 closures this month.
Can I ask a question there, please?
Of course.
In terms of those figures down the bottom, because it does concern me slightly. Say there's been a reduction of 41, I think it was, in closures.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, an increase, I should say.
An increase in case closures, yeah.
Yeah. And also there was a, if you look at the allocated referrals and you look at the closures together, the difference between the two is 40, all right?
Yeah.
Yes, the caseload has only gone down by 27.
Yeah, it's because of the way that the cases move and are allocated in the system and when the data is sort of captured. So you can see that some of the numbers are dated captured on the 9th of July. So I have asked for why we're seeing the query in that at the moment, and I've been told it's because it cuts across months about when the reports are actually done. So I'm looking at how we can make sure that I suppose the data is reflecting the add up really, and that if we're capturing information on slightly different dates, that's clearer in this report.
It's something that worries me when I see that there's a discrepancy between figures like that, how much value you can put on the figures as a whole when you see that. So obviously, as I appreciate it, it's a change over time at the moment, but I think it's something that we need to be keeping an eye on in that sense.
It is. It's something that I've picked up within my service area for the team to start sort of interrogating that in more detail, really, so that we've got assurance, really, that where those anomalies are coming from, or that we've got the explanation behind where that anomaly is that makes sense to us, and that we're not either miscounting or overcounting anything.
Yeah, it's important when we're making decisions on data that the data is correct. But we've said that enough in the past. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We've got the COVID isolations. Again, there's no real significant changes in children with suspected and diagnosed COVID, and 22 children in isolation due to suspected COVID and COVID in a household. So not a huge amount of impact and change in that. Assessments. Oh, sorry, was there a question on that? Sorry.
No, I will ask you something now afterwards, if I may, but go on first of all.
Not at all. Okay. And if I'm going too fast, please let me know. And yeah. Okay, so assessments. We've got 218 assessments open across supported care planning and bays. 37 new single assessments triggered from IIAA within that. There's a high number of overdue assessments at the moment, and that's been caused because, again, that's the problem with the not the problem, but that's been one of the challenges with the transfer into the new system, is creating the way so managers can actually track those through the system. So we've had to create a way that the system will run that, and that's taken some time for us to do. That's now in place, and that's been put in place. So managers are now aware of where those discrepancies are, and are now working with staff in order to ensure that those are on the system and are being completed. So that's been resolved, but not reflected in this, because obviously by the time that this was done, that report still hadn't been completed. Can now report on the direct work that's being undertaken within assessment. So we've got 73% of assessments. The direct work was undertaken. And a priority then for the WCS team is to develop reporting to accurately report assessment completed in timescales. I've been told that this is going to be a priority and will be ready in September.
Okay.
It's what I'm being told at the moment, and what we're working towards.
I think the point I was going to raise was the fact that there was only 45% of the or 45% of the assessments were overdue, which is an inordinately large figure, I guess, by your standards normally.
Yes.
And would be a concern, but again, I guess it's the change over the system is the is the answer you're given to that and the explanation, but it needs to be bottomed out so that you know exactly where you are.
Absolutely.
I will ask if anybody else has got any questions at this point in time on anything that you've gone through so far, Damien. Anybody? Doesn't seem to be.
Okay. So plans and reviews. So we've seen an increase in the number of care and support plans that children have on the system. I suppose one of the challenges has been that there's a change in how staff need to add these onto the system, and we've identified that there's actually a training need for social workers and other workers within the service about how you actually do this to make sure that it's being reported and recorded properly on the system. We've identified that. We've got an action plan about how we're making sure that social workers are able to and are ensuring to do that, because what we want to be seeing is that every child that has an assessed eligible care and support plan has one on the system. So it's a priority area for us to be looking at the moment, and making sure that staff feel confident and able to be putting those on the system in the way that the WCCS requires, because it is different to how they were recording them on Paris. And
I think Stu has got a question for you, Damien.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not certain if this is the appropriate time. I just wondered about the consistency of social workers to cases, and if there's an awful lot of changeover, because there is one case that I'm aware of where there's been something like 5 or 6 social workers in a particular case since last November.
So
I don't know whether this is the right place to bring it up.
No, well, I'm not sure there is a better place to bring it up, so I think that's absolutely fine. I don't mind answering that. Obviously, we want to avoid children moving from social worker to social worker in an unnecessary way. Obviously, there have been some challenges with staffing, and there have been difficulties around ensuring that all children that need to have an allocated social worker are. So sometimes the things are outside of our, I suppose, immediate control. So staff going off on long-term sick, staff vacancies, and needing to cover that. But we would be wanting to ensure that that is kept to a minimum. And you know, and that is the practice. But unfortunately, due to a number of different pressures in the system, there will be a small number of children that will have experienced that. But we would be keeping that to, you know, to a minimum, and we wouldn't be changing social workers for children unless it was absolutely necessary.
It just seemed an excessive number for this particular pair of children.
Yeah, I haven't got the details on. I haven't got the details on that particular case, and
I appreciate
that. And I suppose that one of the things that we are looking at, and that we will need to be looking at in more detail, is moves of social work as child's journey through the system, and allocations, and something that we'll need to reflect on. So I'm happy to go away and have a further look at that anyway, and just understanding, get some reassurance around what has happened there. I haven't got an answer for you today though on that.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No, not at all. Any other questions? Because I can't see anybody else's hands up, unfortunately.
No, I think we're all right at the moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got the PLO, the Public Law Outline and Legal Proceedings. Yeah, we're now able to report on PLO and working on capturing outcomes from PLO. So we currently have 43 children within the PLO. It gives you a better understanding of, I suppose, of the activity and how long children are open for during that. So, and enabling us to offer a higher level internally of scrutiny around that work as well, by being able to report on that and understand that in more detail. Number of children who entered public proceedings then who've gone to court this month is 4, and we've got 55 children currently subject to care proceedings. Moving down to, anybody got any questions on that bit before I move to child protection investigations and child
I
protection?
think you're all right at the moment, Damien.
So, okay, thank you. We've got we've got 105 strategy discussions held. That is a reduction since last month. And there seems to be an even split between the number of strategy discussions that are held between the Safeguarding Hub and the main social care teams. We're continuing to hold weekly child protection reviews with the multi-agency. So, and looking at threshold, we're looking at deregistrations, we're looking at timeliness of escalation and making sure that we are happy with decision making within those. There's a reduction from 25 to 14 in number of children proceeding child protection conference. We are prioritising in Wccis, another Wccis thing that we're trying to prioritise, the ability to report timescales for conference reviews and core groups, so that we're not having to manually sort of track that, actually we want the system to be able to track that for us, because as you will note, that as you normally expect to get, you would normally have the data on that, and the system isn't able to provide us with that at the moment, and that is one of the 10 key priorities that need to be resolved by the beginning of September in Wccis for the performance monitoring. We are continuing, so there's a continued reduction in children coming off the child protection register, down to 257 from 266 the month before. Just to note though that again, and I did double check that these figures did add up before that, which was that 22 children were added to the register this month, and out of those 22 children, 4 had previously been added, had been on the register in the last 12 months. So we will have had a bit more of a detailed look at that as about why they've been re-registered as part of those weekly meetings. And then 31 children were removed off the register last month.
Yes, it looks like the re-registrations is quite a high figure at the moment.
It does. It's difficult when we. So it depends how many children, because you can have one family of 4, couldn't you? And then it's one family have gone back on, and it sort of makes it look like the re-registrations, and it's one family. Because obviously we're measuring individual children there. Again, we are looking at that in more detail with the multi-agency, and we are identifying learning. We're doing a bit of qualitative work at the moment around our deregistrations at first review and our re-registrations within 12 months at the moment, and hoping to pull some themes of that together. That's a piece of work that's currently happening. So I'm sure that we'll be able to put that within the report of any key areas that have been identified around that. I mean, we wouldn't want to see any, really. That would be ideal. In reality, I think, I'm not sure that 4 is the highest, is a particularly high number. But I appreciate the fact that, as I say, we would ideally like to know that when we've deregistered children off the register, that actually we've moved within that 12-month period to a place where they wouldn't need to then come back in to that part of the system, and where there were risks of significant harm. On
Sorry,
a positive,
I was looking at the 28% on the second figure down.
yeah. Ooh. Yeah. So the previously registered, so one of the challenges with that, and I've asked that to be put in, is that could be during the entire life course of a child. So it's not in the last 12 months, that could be in the last 12 years. It's ever. So I suppose that it's understanding a little bit more about when we're recording that, what's significantly changed, because, you know, if it's 5 years past and there are very different circumstances, what does that look like? I agree with you that, again, we would want to keep that number as low as possible, and we are looking at previous registrations and any trends and any themes and any learning or any other issues that we may need to be picking up within that to inform our current practice. But I think it is important to note that that is technically over a life course rather than within the last sort of 12 or even 18 months. And often lots of those are outside of the last 2-3 years. These are rather than sort of immediately coming on and coming back off the register. That's not downplaying that as a point either, Paxton, for and your comment. I'm just trying to give it a bit of a context. Okay.
But obviously it is concerning if we're taking people or children, young people off the register, and then finding them come back on quite soon afterwards, because obviously they've been at risk during that period, I guess.
Absolutely, and I think that it's the 12-month one initially, I think that there is a different story when we're looking at some of the families' journeys within that, where they may have been registered 5-6 years ago, and then their circumstances have significantly changed, where there's been very little intervention, and then there has been another completely unrelated and different incident that has led to a further period of registration. And I suppose that there are slightly different circumstances, I think, for those that sometimes the data doesn't necessarily give the full picture around of that. But I appreciate that, yeah, that's why I was looking at the 4 who've been registered in the last 12 months, because that is clearly something for me around what did we do in the last 12 months that has led to those children needing to come on a very short period of time back onto the register. Okay. And we want to see that number being as low as possible.
Yes. In terms of Saturday visits down there, you're 31% overdue.
Yeah, so job protection Saturday visits, yeah. So we're aware that staff, again, are continuing to struggle with how to record these on the system. So this is a recording issue. So managers currently are manually tracking the team's visits and ensuring that children are being visited, because the system is at the moment unable to report directly to us about the timescales being met for those visits. So managers are assuring us that those visits are done and they are tracking them on a manual basis, but the system itself and how they are being inputted into the system is causing the service a problem around the reliability of that information at the moment. So we've had to go back to manual ways of tracking that to give us the assurance, really, rather than relying, as we were previously in Paris, or just relying on Wccis to do that for us. But we are looking, and again, that is another one of the priority areas that we are looking at within Wccis, of getting that reporting right, because it's one of the key things that we need to be doing. Yes. And reviewing and monitoring. Okay. Anything else on that before I move on to the looking after children? I've talked about then the difficulty again within the Wccis about recording initial core groups being held within timescales and core groups being held. Yeah. So it is proving to be more complicated than I thought would ever need to necessarily be possible, but the analysts are telling me that the way that the system records and then reports back out on information is complicated, and therefore has caused some real challenges for them. But we have, I think, got some work throughs of that, of how we're going to be able to pick that up, because again, they are statutory requirements for us to be making sure that we're getting those things in. So again, they are up there as priorities and are on as a concern for us that we're not able to get the system to report on them. Or again, we are manually tracking those, but that's not, I want the system to be able to track them, not us manually looking at that. We want to make sure that they're into the database and into the system, and that we can report on those via the system. Moving on to look after children.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So further reduction in our looked after children population, down to 515. 8 children became looked after compared to 13 from the month before. There were 20 children who'd ceased to be LAC. Just out of those, worth highlighting that 4 children were adopted, and 6 further children became subject to special guardianship orders within their own families, and 2 returned home. We also had an increase in the number of looked after children reviews that took place that month. And just worth pointing out that no PEPs were due during this period, which is why that's blank. It isn't that we can't report on it, it's that there weren't any actually due.
Okay.
Okay. If I go on to these just... Oh, sorry.
Was that 1 or 2 children returned home then?
It's 1 on the system. It's actually 2. I double checked it yesterday afternoon, actually, when I saw the report. It should have been updated to 2.
Okie dokie.
So when you've got the cease to be looked after for another reason, 1 of those 2 is returned home to parent. I'll come back to the supervisions in a minute. If I go to the youth justice first and then I come back onto supervisions, is that okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, makes sense to talk about the business side of it and then talk about the supervision bit a bit last, if that's okay. Just the way my brain works, I think. So as you can see, 90 children are on an intervention. There are 2 young people on remand. One of them is currently awaiting a sentence, which is scheduled for August due to the serious nature of the offence, custodial sentence being considered by the court, and the other of those was subject to custodial remand following a robbery offence. We got continued consistent numbers of young people open on interventions. All assessments completed this month were completed and quality assured within timeframes. And then another positive is that 2 new social workers have joined the team over the last couple of months, which is going to then mean that they've got a full capacity of social work staff within that service area, again being able to fully meet the needs and the demand within that service area. Okay.
Just to be niggly for a second then again,
Of course.
if I may.
Yeah,
Supervision. No legend as such. So I'm not quite sure exactly what everything means.
Which bit, Paxton? Sorry.
Bottom right-hand graph, the supervision.
Yeah. That's
There's
staff
no-
supervision.
There's no legend with it for the orange bars or the grey bars. Blue
Oh, there
lines.
isn't, is there? That's been dropped off. So, yeah. I think that is how many were, the orange is how many should have taken place, and the grey is how many were actually completed.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
We are. And if I go back up then, leading me into supervision. So again, 79% of staff supervisions have taken place, but I'm aware of the impact in some of the teams around staff sickness and manager sickness, and then being able to undertake supervisions during the period of time. I think the graph is fairly self-explanatory in terms of the supervisions across the main parts of the service.
The concern obviously would be the front door, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I've done it. I've done actually to preempt that. I double checked then to see how many supervisions have actually completed last month, and have been told and had the report today that 100% of them have been done this month.
Okay.
So I wanted some assurance really that we weren't missing month on month where staff were not being supervised at all. So I had that data this morning to say that, and I think that they were struggling with staffing and capacity the month before, and therefore didn't take place. But I'm more assured really that this month that they have taken place. Obviously that will reflect on the next performance report when that comes through. But I wanted to make sure that we weren't going month by month where staff were not having their supervision. And that's the same for the CDT pod 1.
Yes. Okay.
There.
There are a lot of acronyms around still, and that I don't recognise, like SCP and EIP. Don't mean an awful lot to me, I must admit.
That's fine. So that's supported care planning. So that is what we would consider the traditional part of children's services. So
Right.
that are your main social work teams, and then it's early intervention and prevention services. Then, and what was early help services then is EIP.
Okay, we'll have to have a glossary soon, so that I'll know where I am then.
Yeah, or we'll just have to write them out in full and remind ourselves that yeah, not everybody knows our acronyms. So those they're the main parts of the report. I've got a number of next steps of things that we are focusing on. I don't know if you want me to just sort of give you an update on some of the things that we've highlighted that we're doing at the moment.
I think that would be useful.
Yeah. Okay. So the learning and improvement team are supporting teams with how they're recording information on the system, and supporting and working with staff about how to do that appropriately. That team are also working with Wccis to ensure that the performance data is able to be extracted then off the system. So there's the two bits. There's one, are people putting it on the system in the right way? And then is the system then able to give us the data and the information then coming back out of it?
Yep.
So we're trying to sort of close that loop at the moment, and that's been a priority activity, well, since we went live, but it's an ongoing priority activity, and we're working very closely with the programming aspect of Wccis to ask them to build various things into the system so that we can report this information and that we can extrapolate it out. But equally, we're making sure that our staff are putting that data in the first place, because if it's not there, we can't report on it. So we're working on that. As I've already noted, the weekly safeguarding meetings to explore all the child protection actions, really deregistrations, re-registrations in short periods of time, strategy discussions and thresholds. that continues to take place on a multi-agency basis, and we're looking at more qualitative information being able to come through about some of the findings of through that. One of the other things that we're looking at is, and I've started now in the last month, is regular qualitative auditing of case files around key themes, so that we're now starting to drill not just into what the performance data is telling us, but what is the practice actually telling us as well. So not only are we doing it well, and what is that identifying for us? So that includes then the direct work and the quality around the direct work, but it also any form of interaction that we're doing, and as part of that, we're also going to be seeking feedback from children, young people, and families as well about their journey within that, and creating that then, and adding some of the highlights of that within this report to hopefully enrich what is not just the data, but also a little bit more of the depth and the story behind some of the quality of that work as well, for sort of, you know, further kind of.
Do you have the facility to formulate your own reports coming off the database?
So the short answer to that is the classic political answer to that, which is yes and no. The complicated answer is, for the things that we are struggling with, no. We are reliant then on the programmers within the system being able to write programs that get the data out of the system. We can't just run, like, tick a box and say, just tell me these things, because the system doesn't collect the data in the way that is meaningful for us to just pull it back out. So if it says how many visits are due, the parameters to do that are really complicated, and the programming that's involved in order to tell the system what it needs to do aren't automatically built into it as a program. We have to redesign that as a local authority into it. So they are the things that are causing a delay. So my team are, once those are in place, we're able to then extract that data and that information straight away. We're also then able to check it, evaluate it, and do our own internal kind of scrutiny really around the validity of that, making sure that's accurate. But we are reliant on the Wccis software and program and database to be able to produce those reports. We can't just say to it, we want to run X, Y, and Z. I thought it was going to be more straightforward than that, and that we would just be able to do those things. And for some things it's worked, and for others it hasn't. One of the things it's got a real problem with, as you can see, is capturing dates of when things are due and not due. And that seems to be a really complex bit of programming that we're working with the team so that they can put together, so we can get that information out of it.
So to what extent, and I suppose it's a general question really now for David as well, has this change over the Wccis system impacted on your ability to carry out your operations as you would want to?
So, well, as I was saying, we've had to create a number of manual ways of monitoring information and data that is coming through the system as a short term. We've looked at and working with teams around and our check-ins with all of our teams to make sure that that how and what they're doing is working. We've looked at ways of assuring ourselves that things are not being missed through the system by doing more manual auditing and reporting within the service, and via the learning and intervention team, working with those teams to look at team lists, making sure that those activities are actually happening, and probably using more management manpower of what I would probably class as more old-fashioned things, rather than the system being able to do those things for us. Dave's got his hand up, so I don't.
Yes.
Dave will probably want to add a bit more.
You want to come back in, David? Or come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, Damien, for taking us through the report. I suppose I've got a variety of comments, including on the question that you just asked there, Paxton. I'd be ridiculous to say that the transfer to the new system hasn't had an impact. It's had an enormous impact, as we always knew it would. We might not have understood the absolute ins and outs of how it would impact, but we knew it would be a massive change. The system operates in a completely different way to Paris, so people are having to relearn things that they would have taken for granted in terms of understanding just the organisation of the system. Hence all of the comments about people are putting things in the wrong place and therefore when we go to capture the information, the system's looking for it in one place and it's been put somewhere else. And that is because people are still using it as if it was Paris when it's not. It's Wccis, and it will take us a while to unlearn some of the Paris kind of auto responses that we have as as practitioners. And quickly I think we will pick up the more intuitive Wccis approach. There is stuff on top of that, so we anticipated that. We might not have understood it. We knew we would have a period of disruption and extra demand. What we didn't anticipate is the extent of the national issues around performance of the system, which have made things more difficult for us than we would have anticipated. Those national issues are being picked up and addressed, and to some extent we are benefiting from the fact that actually those national pressures were causing problems for other organisations significant months ahead of us implementing. So, that they've suffered the pain longer. The solutions are now being delivered, and it's then going to be less impactful for us, and over a shorter period of time. But it has compounded our difficulties at the moment. What that means for practitioners is, contrary to what we would always work for, or work towards in terms of creating the best of conditions, is they're spending too much time working on recording stuff instead of doing face-to-face delivery of services, or when they're prioritising the face-to-face delivery of services, they're not then getting enough of the stuff recorded. Hence, we're having performance issues. But some of us in this room have been around quite a long time in Swansea and can remember the swapping from paper files to the first electronic system, and then the swapping from that first electronic system to Paris, and can remember years and years and years of not having any performance information at all, which made the job of this scrutiny panel particularly difficult. That's not an excuse for, or a kind of, downplaying the worry about. It's clearly not as smooth as we'd like it to be. It's clearly taken us a few months to get that right, but it's a relatively short period of time. If you think about the whole history of children's services, and as Damien has described, other things are being put in place. They're not great in terms of, giving absolute assurance and being able to report information in the way that we would want, but it's given us enough assurance that we're not missing anything, dreadful, and that we're causing harm to children or families, etc. Now, in the past, we wouldn't have known that, and we've had periods in our history in Swansea where we were really worried about our arrangements and whether children were safe for the families. We're a million miles away from that. These are some technical issues that will take us a bit of time to work through. It's frustrating for me, as well as I'm sure it is for you, in that, my ask as we did the implementation is, on day one of turning on the new system, all the reports have to work. Now, I never believed that would happen, but that was the expectation that we placed. I guess my most pessimistic view of it was that it would take us 6 months to get back to where we were pre-implementation. I'm hoping that we're somewhere in the middle. We clearly didn't have it all working when we turned it on. I'm hoping that it doesn't take us 6 months based on the progress that has already been made. So the report is fuller than it was the previous month, significantly fuller. I think the latest iteration that you haven't seen yet and is fuller again. And I suppose there's also a bit, Chair, that we know that even with the Paris stuff that we were used to, each time we reported, there were still gaps. We were still asking questions, and we were still being told, well, that's in development. So it's right to be concerned and to ask those challenging questions. I don't think we can give total assurance at the moment because we're seeing what we're seeing, and we can see that there are gaps. I can say that there, as Damien has described, there are other manual workarounds going on to give us generally overall assurance that we're not missing anything substantial, that we're not, we're not putting anybody at risk. it is causing an added burden to social workers and other staff that we could do without. Yeah, particularly at the moment, we've had a really, really difficult 12, 18 months. Of course, we all have.
Yeah, of course.
We've now got this added burden, and Councillor Jones raised the question about, you know, how much churn is there around, you know, movement of social workers, you know, disrupting continuity of care, etc. And I think Damien's right. You know, it might be relatively low level, but for that individual child that Councillor Jones referenced, or for any other children that are suffering that disruption, that is significant. It's significant that there is that churn, and the overall picture in Wales and across the UK around the loss of social work capacity from the overall system, and the pace at which we're able to recruit new staff or grow our own, which I think is increasingly going to have to be, you know, the focus of our strategy. There is a mismatch there. So I think we are going to have more disruption than we would like. So clearly, added pressure at this time when you've got a tired workforce, a depleted workforce, struggling to recruit, struggling to retain, and that's not just us, that's across Wales, that's across the UK. We could do without this added pressure, so mitigating it as quickly as possible has to be a priority. I'd encourage the committee to, your questions are absolutely the right ones, to keep that pressure on. You know, you need to be seeing progress each month. If there are specific areas where, you know, in the absence of data, you want more information, I think you ask for that more information. So even if it doesn't come through in the numbers, if you need feedback from some of Damien's audit activity, ask for that feedback from that audit activity on top of the report, so that you're getting that additional assurance. That I think that's important, and I'd encourage you to do that. And I'll just finish up with my overall view of the highlight figures, because, you know, you can get tied up in the figures and think, oh, look, it's a bit, you know, we're a bit uncertain about some of that stuff. If I took a helicopter view of it, I'd be looking at it saying, well, actually, there's some good stuff in here. Yeah, the looked after children's population, you know, we're seeing a sustained now over a number of months reduction in our numbers of looked after children, where previously for quite some months now, you know, more than a year, you know, we'd seen increasing numbers. And the previous head of service and now the new head of service have talked about, we're doing all this work to create the conditions in which those numbers will come back down. And we're beginning to see that now, and we're beginning to see it over a number of months. And we're not seeing any other indications that suggest, you know, that's a worry, i.e., the right children aren't becoming looked after, or we're, you know, inappropriately intervene. There's no indication of that. So I'm really encouraged by that. We're seeing, you know, for a couple of years now, we'd seen increasing numbers of children subject to a child protection plan, and the numbers just kept creeping up, and they were at historic highs, and we would have expected them to come down, and we're starting to see them come down again. So again, I'm reassured about that some of the direction of travel is showing through in the reporting, and I think reflects particularly well on, you know, Julie, you know, new Julie, the senior management team, clearly, most importantly, the efforts of the workforce. I'm really encouraged by the information that we're now starting to get around the impact of those new early help, you know, early intervention and prevention services that are now much more integrated with children's services overall. So we're seeing the numbers of children being supported earlier increasing, the numbers of children escalating up the continuum of need and needing statutory intervention, becoming subject to child protection plans, becoming looked after, they're coming down. So if you took big helicopter view, I'm looking at this thinking there's a lot of encouragement in here that reflects well on the council, reflects well on that strategic direction, you know, those plans that we've been putting in place for a number of years, and is bucking the trends elsewhere. If I look at across Wales, they're still seeing in lots of places significant increase in looked after children, numbers of children subject to child protection plans increasing. Now, you know, not time to become complacent, because, you know, there's still real pressure on us in the way that Damien has described. But there is some encouragement in there. The one area that I'd flag and say, you know, it's been flagged in advance, and Julie flagged it and the cabinet member have flagged it. You know, we're worried about that smaller cohort of looked after children that were ending up in more institutionalised forms of care. We were anticipating that those numbers would go up, and they have been going up. But I think we're starting to see some evidence that might either be tailing off or might be coming down. Now, if we can sustain that, that's probably quicker than I would have anticipated. I thought we'd probably see growth, you know, that may well go into next year. So if that's, you know, if that started to level off and potentially come down sooner than we might have been anticipating, again, that reflects really well on the, you know, the approaches that the directorate are taking, you know, that work in early help, the work around educare, the direct work, we're seeing lots of evidence of, you know, improvements in the amount of direct work taking place. Lots of that is absolutely extraordinary. We must never forget the context in which we're reporting this stuff is COVID, you know, a dreadful 12, 18 months, an exhausted workforce, real challenges for the leadership of the workforce because of remote work and all of that stuff. So I'm sitting here thinking that, you know, accepting all of those challenges about Wccis, and I wished it had been easier and I wished it was quicker to, you know, to get things up and running. But nevertheless, we'll work our way through it. Overall, I'm thinking, goodness me, this is again a real endorsement of the hard work of our workforce. You know, incredible leadership from Julie and her senior management team to get us into this place, and we'll tackle the Wccis stuff and the getting the reporting over, you know, in the next month or so. And we have got mitigation in place to make sure we're not missing something, something big. So that's a bit of a soapbox oratory, Chair, but
Well,
you know, that's my view of the world, I suppose.
I got to say, I looked at the first page, and the three graphs on the right hand side there, child protection, basically on target with you, coming down slightly, I suppose, but stable, despite what the concerns you would have had as a result of domestic violence, etc. That's probably gone on during this last 12 months or so. Looked after children, as you say, coming down very significantly and coming down to your target now. And this children in care, children in need of care and support, that figure very low. Are we any reason to understand why that is compared with your targets? And it has been dropping with a peak, I suppose, in April, but gone back down again. But those are all very positive figures, really, from your point of view. And I understand what you're saying about those helicopter figures. And that hasn't been, and you obviously haven't been helped. All your problems have been exacerbated by COVID and also by this change of computer system as well, I guess, because you're not getting the program work coming out of it that you would have had before, I assume.
Yeah, no, I mean, my view of that is the overall figure around numbers of children in need of care and support is linked with that, you know, reworking of what our early help offer is or not. Now, you know, unless Damien contradicts that and says he has a completely different view, that's my understanding of it. It's early evidence of, you know, what was a, you know, we're going back years, aren't we, around talking about we need to invest more in prevention. We need to join that up more with, you know, an obvious and clearer continuum of need approach that you know, linked to statutory services, but joins up our early help offer, and then investment in that early help offer. That was the council's plan. It took us a long time to get that plan up and running. COVID impacted, you know, our plan was to open the 5 early help hubs, and then suddenly we had, you know, a global health pandemic. So we had to do something different, but they're starting to open now. So, you know, there's lots of encouraging stuff in here. And I suppose I'm emphasising that because I don't want us to be totally distracted by, well, we got some computer problems and that's masking, you know, and we should be worried about it until you see the numbers accurately. You know, big part of your job is to keep challenging. Hang on a minute, we can't be completely assured, and that's right. But there's some encouraging stuff in here as well. I don't want that to be missed and overlooked.
No, I think that's what I was just saying myself then a few minutes earlier, David. And it's, as I see it, by and large, it is a real compliment to the department, the way those overall figures are going, considering the problems you've had. Now, I was certainly very heavily involved in, when I was working in the installation of computer systems, I would have said as an expert user rather than as a programmer of that, and sort of that nature. I can understand the problems that you get when you go from one system to another, problems that causes, and I think it must have been very difficult with this on top of COVID, and it could have been, you've been quite happy to have had it delayed for 12 months or 2 years. And I was wondering whether you'd have a facility, but you wouldn't, obviously, in the circumstances now. There's two systems side by side, so that you could make sure that you're getting what you needed at all times, but it wouldn't have been possible. I understand that with what's been going on, but I don't know whether that's what was planned in the first place. But I think it's very easy for us to look at those figures and pick up and criticise occasional figures here and there, because it's always going to be the case. But the overall picture, I think, is a credit to the department, and I would hope that most members would agree with that. And I can't see anybody particularly argue with me. I'm seeing some nodding heads as well. So, okay. In that case, unless anybody's got any other questions or comments, I will say thank you very much to Damien for the presentation, for taking us through it. I know we're still not getting, there's still a lot of data we don't get that we were getting before. We'll need to look at that again, I think, as we go through over the next few months, and 12 months, 18 months or whatever. But that's another story again, I think. But thank you very much for that. And if I may, unless anybody's got any other questions, I will move on to item 7, which is the verbal update on the Care Inspectorate Wales assurance visit. I know we had a verbal report on the initial feedback from Julie last month. I wasn't sure whether we were actually going to see the written report this time, but obviously not. I don't know what you want to say or what you want to add, David, at this point in time. So I'll give you the opportunity to take it from there. I don't know if Elliot wants to come in at any point in time, but if you do, Elliot, obviously just put your hand up and I'll be happy to call you in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We have received a draft letter. I haven't shared it because it's still a draft letter, so CIW wouldn't want us to put something in the public domain until it's properly written to us. But we're not expecting the letter to change. So I'll share the content, or the my kind of summary of the content of that, and we'll receive a letter in due course, and then it'll be referenced in what CIW publish as a kind of national thematic of all of the assurance visits that they've carried out. So hopefully I'm repeating what you heard previously, because we were pretty happy with the feedback. That it was consistent with what we'd received verbally. So just remind you, the visit took place beginning of June. I think I noticed in the minutes that it said that 5 cases were looked at. It was my understanding that 16 cases were looked at. It may have been that 5 cases were looked at in depth, unless Chris knows any different to that. I think it was 16 cases that were looked at.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So again, just by way of reminder, so that they carried out meetings with staff, with partners, providers, and then most importantly, children, parents, and carers. Carried out a staff survey, also a partner survey, and a survey of people that have been using services as well. Lots of checking of documents as part of the kind of background checks as that leading up to the visit. And they're focusing on a couple of things. Predominantly, how are we discharging our statutory functions to keep people who need care and support, carers who need support, safe and promote their well-being during the pandemic. There's an obvious pandemic focus, and then had a particular focus on our work around preventing the need for children to come into care, and our work to make sure that we were supporting children to be able to return home safely to their families and communities. I can't remember off the top of my head when we're expecting the national thematic report, but it's at some stage in the next couple of months. So of course we'll bring that back to scrutiny when that arrives, and when I get the final confirmed letter, I'll share a copy of that as well.
Okay, David, I think last month we were saying that there seemed to be very little criticism coming forward from CIW, and that is something that I found was really positive coming out of the report, that there was nothing negative.
Yeah, and I'll give you some of the details that they've now confirmed. Yeah, so I mean, first thing to say is their feedback was entirely consistent with our kind of self-assessment of where we thought we were at. So the things that we thought we were doing well and with confidence, they provide us feedback to confirm that. Things where we knew we had areas of improvement that we were flagging ourselves in our presentation, they found the good corroboration of that and didn't find anything else. So that in itself is a real positive. Yeah, we understand our business, and we are realistic around our expectations around things that we need to improve. So that was good. They explicitly talked about our staff being committed, loyal and positive, and reflected positively on the visibility of managers at all levels, senior managers, team managers, etc. Really important, and they've written confirming that they found the evidence of that. The front door they described as easy to access, good at its work around signposting and diversion, good at providing timely responses. Well, your front door is such a crucial part of safe service delivery. It's really positive that they found strong evidence of what we would expect of ourselves, and to some extent take for granted. But it's good to prove that was an accurate understanding. They really liked our early help hubs and had good feedback from partners and others about the effectiveness of that work, despite the impact of COVID. So again, really positive. Reflects positively on our signs of safety and our signs of well-being work. So signs of well-being across prevention, early health services, signs of safety and statutory services. And they commented that provides a really good shared vocabulary, both across the workforce, but also importantly that children and families know what we are talking about, irrespective of what part of the continuum that we're intervening in. That's, again, really positive. They recognise that demand and complexity is increasing at the front door. Well, Damien's just, again, reported on that to us. Certainly, again, a really crucial bit. Good analysis of risk and timely action taken. Any of us that were involved in the work around, at the darkest period in our children's services history, that bit around good risk analysis and timely intervention, absolutely crucial. So again, very reassuring to get that feedback that even during the pandemic, the inspectors could find evidence of that was the way we were practicing. So that's great. Really like some of our innovation around communication and engagement. Again, that's both with children, with families, with our workforce, with our partners. Fed back very positively on partnership working, particularly acknowledged the improved partnership working with education colleagues and schools. Really crucial during the pandemic when we had children, out of schools being taught remotely, etc. So again, positive feedback about the arrangements that we put in place and encouragement that we have maintained those better links and better approaches post the last wave. Reflected positively on the co-production focus in the corporate parenting board. That reflects really well on the approach and priorities of the chair. So thanks to the cabinet member for driving that work. That was that's really positive. In terms of the things that they picked up as issues for us, doesn't come as a surprise. Staff feeling under significant pressure. Well, it'd be a real real surprised if they hadn't found that. And we've talked about that in the in the session today. Quality assurance, overall quality assurance arrangements. What they reflected back was they can see evidence of improvements around that being more coherent, but still that it's a work in progress. And that's some of what Damien's referring to when he's talking about next steps. And they might be things that I think the committee, might want to pick up going forward, some specific examples around how that overall quality assurance is being improved. It's not just about the numbers, it's about a range of audit activity and checking case files and interviews with children and families and all sorts of things. So that might be something for the work programme going forward. And then the last one, again, we've talked about it considerably during this meeting, that Wccis is a challenge around implementation. They're clearly hearing about some of the challenges across Wales. They experienced it themselves when they were trying to undertake their work, that the system, had some challenges for them accessing information that they needed to access. It is important to state, though, that when they experienced challenges, we found ways of getting them the information that they needed, whether in a different format or not, so that they could undertake their checks properly. And they were at pains to stress, we did all of the checks that we needed to do, so we're giving you accurate feedback. But that's it, Chair. That's the edited highlights. As soon as we get the final letter and the thematic report, we'll circulate it for members of the committee.
As you say, David, it appeared to be very positive from what Julie told us last month and what you've told us now. And obviously, we'd like to take back our appreciation to the staff in that sense, in terms of the work and effort that's gone in over this last 12, 18 months, whatever, in terms of being able to get a report of that nature. And we will look forward to seeing the letter. Anybody got any questions for David at this point in time? I can't see any hands up, in which case I will move on to item 8, which is the outcome from the TNANT inspection, which I think Chris is going to comment on. I think for a change, it would appear that we have a very concerning document this time, with a number of priority action notices, which has been very rare in my memory, and I'm sure Des would agree with me on that one, because we've been around some time in this. But obviously the details of the action plan demonstrate that the department knows what it needs to do, it needs to get done. And we really need to know where you are going with that now, Chris, and how far on we are, and when we're going to have things back in a situation where we will be reasonably content as a council that we're in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. Would it be helpful if I took you through the action plan in a moment, the current version?
Yes, of course.
Take it through, you go through each of the issues then hopefully in turn and see where we are in terms of taking that forward. I suppose more broadly, just to touch upon the it does identify a number of issues and challenges, and but they were issues that we probably anticipated. It's been there's no excuses, and we've got to do better for the young people that require that service. However, it's been a particularly challenging 18 months for care homes, and the manager had been off for 6 months because of matters outside of work, and therefore putting in place the changes that we knew had to be made has been problematic, to say the least. But that is an excuse, and we definitely need to make some progress on that. As you see from the report, there were some positives identified in terms of some of the practice by the staff. 2 of the young people in placement, for example, spoke very positively about their relationships with the staff, and that they were happy there, and that they enjoyed the experience at TNANT. The issue which I would wholly accept is that there wasn't the evidence that was consistently the case, and that practice was consistently good. and there, as I mentioned, there's definite areas of improvement. Again, one of the areas of improvement that we've got to drive forward regards quality assurance. But if I share my screen, and I'll show you a copy of the action plan, and I can take you through that.
I think that'd be useful. I appreciate we're talking very small numbers of children or young people here in these circumstances, but it is still key for them, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. This is a service supporting some of the most complex young people that are open to our service. So one of the areas of improvement concerns the staffing structure. Now, this was an area which we fully understood was a problem. The service had been restructured a number of years ago, and it didn't have enough staff. To summarise, it didn't have enough staff to meet the level of demand upon the service. And that meant then that we were too heavily dependent on agency workers, flexi workers, and we weren't providing the young people the continuity they needed. Now, we knew about this, but we hadn't been able to progress with plans to put that right. We'd started to make those arrangements, but they weren't in place by the time CIW visited, so it was no surprise that they identified that there were issues in terms of the staffing arrangements. But in terms of the staffing structure, I can confirm that, and this is the same, where you see an action like 1.1 which has been greyed out, that's to indicate that that's now been completed. So 1.1, we've restructured the service, we've got more staff on the rota now, and we're already starting to see the benefits of that. Aside from just the challenges in terms of, obviously this is a service which has had to continue to run on a 24/7 basis throughout COVID, and that's been difficult at times, and there have been staff shortages because of COVID, but not having enough staff in the structure has also puts additional resource pressures on the management team, and it also makes it more difficult, unfortunately, to release staff to complete training, and then that obviously impacts on their practice. So not having enough structure, staff on the structure is a fundamental issue which has contributed to a number of the issues, in my view, that CIW identified. So I'm glad to say now that we do have sufficient staff in the service working, so that's definitely a positive development. We are looking at the pool of flexi staff, and there are a number of vacancies there now following the restructure. Adverts have gone out for those, there's been shortlisting, and there's interviews on the 26th of August. So as a team now looking at this service and responding to this inspection report, we meet on a weekly basis every Thursday morning. So we'll be meeting tomorrow morning. We're going through it to make sure that we are making the changes that need to happen in order to satisfy CIW, but of course more importantly to make sure that the young people are receiving the service they deserve. The assistant manager has been taken off the rota. That's to provide additional managerial resource to complete the things like supervisions and making sure team meetings are happening, and making sure the home runs smoothly. So that's happened. Previously, the assistant manager had managerial duties, but she was also having to work hands-on with the children while she was in the home. So we recognised that was something that we needed to change. We've secured some additional support within the department from the principal social worker who's helping us in a number of different aspects, and I'll touch upon some of the areas whereby the principal social workers are helping us in a minute. And we've had some additional support come from other areas of the department as well, which has been very useful. We've devised a new staffing rota, so that's in place. You can see that's been greyed out. Young people are involved in the recruitment of new staff. So one of the things that we picked up in the report about making sure that young people were involved in terms of the shaping of the service and day-to-day decision making, and this was one of the ones that we were easily able to change. And so the young people will be involved in the interviews of staff and the flexi staff that are going to take place at the end of the month that I referred to just a moment ago. In terms of 2.1, so this whole area of the action plan, the focus of this concerns making sure that staff have the support, training and supervision that they need. So we've developed a list of responsibilities. So we've identified that a lot of it is kind of housekeeping type tasks, but also maintaining certain paperwork, that some of that was slipping. So we've devised a checklist to make sure that people are completing certain things, and everyone understands what's expected when they come onto shift in terms of some of those kind of undertakings. All new staff have the required qualifications for the role or working towards them. So we've done an audit in terms of where we're looking in terms of qualified staff. Following the restructure, we all of our full-timers are qualified, and 3 of our part-timers are working towards completing their qualification, and one is new and they are completing their EWIF. That's I'm often involved in terms of children's homes and commission services, and I think that it's fair to say that that's quite a high level of qualified staff. Obviously we want everyone to be qualified, but I think compared to the rest of the sector, that's quite a high level of qualified staff that we've now got in the home, which is positive to see. Staff access to training. So I've already touched upon the fact that training has been difficult. It's been difficult because of COVID, but it's also been difficult because when there weren't enough shift staff on the rota, it was often difficult for staff to be taken off so that they could attend training. By working with the training department closely, we've developed a training plan. We had, some of these things were already in motion, so we'd already been working with the training department on coming up with a schedule of training that would be beneficial for the staff at Teenant, and CIW saw that, and they were, I think, quite impressed with the quality of that training plan. So it's about implementing that now, making sure that staff are released and attend the training opportunities that they've got. And I think because of, we're monitoring that much more closely, there's the greater managerial oversight that that's going to happen. We can be confident that's going to happen now. This is something that's been an issue for some time. It is the frequency and level of supervision within the home. This is something that they picked up previously in a former inspection. We've, as I touched upon, the assistant manager is now off the, is no longer required to work on a hands-on basis. And between the assistant manager and the manager, who's now returned to work, I am confident that we'll be able to undertake supervisions as required. The other thing that we've done that is quite a basic thing. We've purchased, we made an order for more laptops. Previously, the staff there didn't have a laptop, so by purchasing laptops, supervisions gives just more freedom, flexibility, really, to undertake things like supervision, participate in meetings, attend training courses virtually, and the like.
Can I give you a little rest there for a second, if I may, Chris? Because
of course, yeah.
I think Yvonne has got a question she'd like to ask.
Oh, apologies, I can't. Sorry, when I'm sharing my screen, I can't see.
That's
no,
okay, Chris. I
fine.
know that. Thanks very much, Chair. You sort of answered one of them, but I was wondering, bearing in mind COVID and everything, and now everything's online, why wasn't the training being offered online? And how often is supervision is my other question. Because, sorry, go ahead.
So supervision should be taking place on a monthly basis for the full-timers and part-timers, and it's every 6 weeks for the flexi workers who only work there. They should only be working there to fill gaps when, maybe there's a period of absence for one of the full-timers or part-timers. So that they don't work in the home as regularly. In terms of the training, there was training provided remotely, virtually, and that was happening. It probably wasn't across the breadth of subject areas that we probably would have wanted for the home. They need to participate in some quite specialist and intensive training.
Oh, you're frozen.
I think you.
He has frozen.
I think you seized up for a minute, Chris.
Okay. So he's back. Chair, could I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
It's just that. Why is it supervision every month? It seems highly intensive. Is it because of the role, or?
Yeah, as I touched upon at the outset, this is a home that is supporting some of our most complex young people, and the staff there will be asked to deal with quite challenging situations on a regular basis. So it's important then, therefore, that they receive frequent supervision from their managers, and we're also looking to bring in some more specialist consultations with the internal therapy service, and that started this week, to provide them with that kind of clinical kind of therapeutic input as well. So they've got that assistance in terms of understanding why the children's behaviours might be in a certain way, understand maybe some of the children's complex emotional needs. Yeah. So that's why the supervision is frequent.
I think the word supervision sort of threw me, but it's more a support mentoring because of the type of work they do that they have every month, as opposed to supervision. Are you doing your job properly?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I think it's very similar, Yvonne, to the sort of supervision that we were talking about earlier in the performance report.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah.
Kevin, you got a question?
Yes, please, if I can. I have two questions. Why is it taking the CIW to identify these issues and not the management? And are there similar problems at other homes, please?
I would say that a lot of the vast majority of the findings within the CIW report were things that we were conscious of, I was certainly conscious of as the principal officer responsible for the area, and a number of the issues were were being raised with me by the registered manager of the service. So they weren't, it wasn't so much that we didn't know about it. There were a couple of things, that CIW picked up on, which wasn't on my radar. But like I said, the vast majority we were aware of. It was just last year was a very difficult year in terms of implementing the changes that we knew we needed to make because of the manager being on leave and because of the fact we were dealing with the practicalities of continuing to operate a service that needed to operate on a 24/7 basis during the pandemic. But that isn't that's not to say that I shouldn't have done more, and the manager of the home we shouldn't have done more collectively to make sure that we were taking forward the necessary actions. But yeah, it was planned that we were going to be taking forward a lot of these actions anyway.
Sorry, there was a second question as well.
Yeah. Are there any similar problems at other homes?
Oh, sorry. So this is the only children's home operated by the council. In terms of the wider situation, in terms of what it looks like for the majority of children's homes in Swansea, as they are across UK, are run independently, I think it's fair to say it's a very difficult time for residential care services. I think lots of residential care services are currently struggling. COVID has hit care homes particularly hard, and staffing is extremely challenging at the moment across the piece. Like I said earlier, I think one of the strengths of the service that we do have a number of staff who are, and this is something that CIW spoke to me about verbally, we do have a number of long-standing members of staff. We've now got we've got a relatively high proportion of qualified staff. They are not characteristics that I would say many children's homes have got at the moment. It is a difficult time for children's homes at present, but this is the only one run by the council.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris?
Just go get it back on my screen. This was just one of the things that we identified in terms of ensuring that there's good communication. It's important that there's regular team meetings, and so they've been scheduled. As I've mentioned just a moment ago, we are accessing some support from the internal therapy service, who are providing consultations to the staff team and helping to enhance the quality of the personal planning that's taking place within the home. The laptops, I think I've mentioned the laptops. So one of the key challenges raised by the inspectorate was that the service being delivered at TNAN isn't in accordance with that described within the statement of purpose. And perhaps the most striking area was in terms of the disparity between the therapeutic model of care that was described within the statement of purpose and how the staff were trained and practicing in the home. Again, that was something that we were I was aware of. I knew that was an issue, that there was a gap in terms of staff training, and that was why we'd done some work with the training department to develop a training plan. But and that is being that's being rectified now. But obviously, at the time that CIW visited, understandably they've picked up on that, and that's been a concern for them, quite rightly. They noted that the fire drills within the home are not taking place in accordance with statement of purpose as well. They flagged the need to look at some of our policies. So we've got I'll be undertaking an audit of the policies. I should say that you can see that some of these have been the dates have been pushed back a little bit. What we intentionally did when devising this action plan was we were very ambitious in terms of the timescales around completing some of these things. What we've, you know, and probably knew it was going to be like this if we were that there was going to be some drift, on not drift, but some delay in completing some of these, because some of them are dependent on the involvement of others. They're not entirely within our gift. So, for example, you can see the fire safety one, that's been pushed back a little bit. That was because we wanted colleagues from health and safety to come out and do an inspection of the home and advise us on what some of our policies, like the fire safety policy, should look like. So we were working a little bit to the kind of timescales of when they could do that visit. That's taken place now, and the records can now be amended, but it's just meant that some of those dates have been pushed back. Ultimately, the date that we've got to complete the necessary actions is by the end of September, and I'm again confident that we'll achieve that target. So policies need to be updated following the audit. Where we identify that policies need to change, then obviously we need to make sure that that's completed. One of the things that one of the strongest messages coming through from the inspection report was around the quality of the documentation used by the home, particularly around assessment and care planning, and that it wasn't always completed to a high standard, which is again something that we'd acknowledge, and it often wasn't constructed in a way that gave staff enough direction as to what is expected, and it didn't provoke them to complete things to the detail that that we need to see is being completed. So the major documentation with the young people's files has now been revised. It's we've the only outstanding task now in terms of that is we're going to send that to the principal social worker, and that's one of the areas that she's agreed to support us with in terms of reviewing the quality of that paperwork to make sure we've got it absolutely right. She's done a lot of that work already within the wider department, so we think she'll make a helpful contribution. But the paperwork has now been completely revisited for the children's files. As soon as we've got that completed in terms of the principal social worker confirming that it's as good as it can be, then the next step then is training the staff in the completion of that new paperwork. So we've got to be getting on. We've got some workshops planned and team meetings, and to get across the messages that staff need to now be taken forward. 4.3 is about ensuring that we're then reviewing the young people's personal plans in accordance with good practice. We've now got a new review document. That's one of the documents that we've developed. Young people are consistently supported to contribute to the assessment and planning documents. Again, the previous ones weren't always, they weren't constructed in a way that allowed us to capture and ensure young people were, it wasn't enabling young people to participate as fully as it should be. So hopefully the new paperwork will be more effective in that respect. 4.5. So you'll see at the bottom of most of the areas for improvement entails an audit. So once we've put in place the necessary changes, revisiting it, completing an audit to make sure that it's being complied with, that we are following what we've set out to do, and that it's having, most importantly, the impact then in terms of the quality of service that the young people receive. So again, 4.5 will be auditing the paperwork at the end of September, and then again at the end of November, to make sure it's being consistently completed to a high standard. The fifth area of improvement concerns the actual physical environment. A couple of those items have already been agreed. The outstanding one is in the process of being completed, and we're liaising with corporate property services to rectify that. Area 6, now this concerns the quality assurance arrangements, which I briefly alluded to earlier. There was new legislation that came in, and regulations came in 2017, and the regulations were later than that. And they've introduced and they've increased the threshold really and the expectations on care homes quite rightly. But I think what this is identified is we haven't responded to make sure that our policies, procedures, and our quality assurance arrangements have meet that threshold. A lot of our existing performance information is concerned with numbers, and it's quite quantitative rather, and we need to rectify that focus so that we're getting more of an understanding of the progress that the young people are making, and getting more feedback from young people, from staff members, and from family and other interested stakeholders. So revisiting our quality assurance arrangements is a big area of focus for this action plan. Yeah, and that's where we are with things as they currently stand.
Okay, Chris, thank you for taking us through that. I'm just wondering where you get this feedback at the moment. You want to come in, David?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm getting an echo. Chris, can you turn your... Oh, thanks. I mean, Chris did a bit of a mea culpa there. Good and necessary that he took us through the detailed thing, and I suppose I picked up from his feedback his sense of, I knew about some of this stuff, most of this stuff we didn't get around to doing stuff. I think I want to qualify that slightly. Chris has inherited the responsible individual role. I absolutely accept there's his part in, I had some responsibility here, it was a really difficult time, etc. I would broaden that though. It was a wider children's services responsibility to make sure that those quality assurance arrangements were in place, for us to have picked this up and shared responsibility for, even during a really difficult period. And COVID, that last 12, 18 months was a really difficult period, that we all understood that there were concerns that we needed to be addressing, and that we were either making a decision, that we couldn't do some of that stuff because there were practical obstacles, or that we found ways of supporting getting that stuff done quicker. You said at the beginning, Chair, it's unusual for us to receive a report like this. We thankfully don't often receive reports suggesting that we've got these sorts of difficulties, but there have been times where we have. Wccis was the most recent one. For me, that last section around, there were expectations, quality assurance expectations fitting with the new regulation and inspection rules that should have actually alerted me to the fact that there was a worry, and I didn't spot it. So Councillor Griffiths asked the question about, are there other homes that we would have similar concerns? Well, we don't run any other children's homes, but we run other homes across the directorate, and I am conscious that I receive those quality assurance reports that on those other homes under the new regulation and inspection regulations, and I haven't received one from in relation to Tynant, and I could have spotted that. If our arrangements were right, I could have spotted that. Actually, why haven't I received any report in respect of Tynant? Because we should have had consistent arrangements across the directorate. So there is a shared responsibility, as always, for when we've got challenges like this, systemic failings in some of our arrangements. I take considerable reassurance from the work that Chris has done, supported by the head of service, about getting those things up and running within this within this home. And it fits with that overall picture of, you can never take your eye off the ball of anything. You have to have as comprehensive a quality assurance arrangement as you can across the piece, capable of sustaining even the most difficult times like we've experienced in the last 12 or 18 months, so that when there are issues, they are surfaced, they are escalated, that we're all aware, including this committee, and that we're all aware the pace at which we are doing or unable to do things. So it is a bit of a wake-up call. It did take me by surprise. I'm sure it took the cabinet member by surprise as well. But we all have a responsibility in making sure that arrangements are in place to make sure we're being the best that we can be. So I appreciate Chris's candour and the fact that he is taking responsibility and sharing the report, saying, I take responsibility for this, I'm the principal officer, but actually it's a shared responsibility. And certainly I personally failed in not spotting that I wasn't receiving reports from that home, and I am receiving reports from all the other homes across Swansea. So I just want to be candid with the committee about that.
Okay, David, thank you. Has anybody else got any questions now for Chris? In that case, I will say to you, Chris, thank you very much for the report. I guess it was not the easiest of reports to present, I must admit. We probably had easier ones to do than that. But it is obvious, I think, from what you presented, that you're systematically working through that action plan. Obviously, there will be a certain degree of spotlight, I guess, within the service in terms of Tynant now. So that's obviously going to be beneficial at the end of the day. But hopefully you will be able to come back in the not too distant future and say things are now a lot better than they were. And we intend to keep them that way. So on that basis, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your, as David said, your candidness in terms of the way you've presented it and for accepting responsibility. And as David says, there's a degree of responsibility throughout the system for that, I suppose. And probably it's not one of the questions that we've asked particularly, so we've got a responsibility to bear there as well. Anyway, thank you very much for that. And In that case, I will now move on to item 9, which is a work programme timetable.
Just before we go on, Chair, can we have a report back in a couple of or at an appropriate time on progress made?
I think so. I think that was possibly something that I was implying anyway, Des, that we would want to see some sort of feedback coming back to us to let us know that things are going in the right direction. But I think you're absolutely right in that, and we will need to see that for our not satisfaction, but for us to be satisfied that we are doing the right things in the department.
Thank you.
Cyril, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to reiterate your words, and I'd like to thank Dave Howes and Chris for being upfront with us. I know Chris has got a big responsibility on his shoulders, but thanks for being truthful. And I think, as the chair said, it'll look better now when you report back to us in a couple of months.
You want to come back in, Chris?
Yeah, just to say thank you. Like I said earlier, the target is to complete the actions by the end of September. We will have CIW undertaking another visit shortly. We can count on that. We don't know when that'll be. It'll be unannounced, but maybe October, by which time we will be hopefully have completed all of that action plan. Might be a opportune moment to come back and give you an update.
Yes, that sounds eminently sensible. So anyway, thank you very much again, Chris. As I now move on to item 9, work programme timetable. Meeting next month. A couple of items there. Progress on the child and family improvement programme. We'll have an update hopefully from the corporate parenting board, which we are required to have on a 12-monthly basis, and an update on the child disability service. So on that basis, can I thank everybody for attending the meeting and everybody who's made their contributions, and say thank you very much and good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Yeah, can I just
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
give my apologies for next month?